I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of Oregon City Council for October 14th, 2024. The time is 7 p.m. If you join me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Rossman, will you please take a roll call of council, please?
Mrs. Ackerman? Here. Mr. Drake?
Here.
Mr. Horniak?
Here.
Mrs. Paula?
Here.
Mr. Reeves?
Here.
Mr. Salander?
Here.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Here. Thank you, Ms. Ross. Thank you, council. Please note all council members are here for the meeting this evening. Also joining us at tonight's meeting is Mayor Michael Safarian, City Administrator Joel Mazer, Clerk of Council Cassie Rawson, Law Director Melissa Purpura, Public Service Director Paul Roman, Police Chief Brandon Began, Assistant Police Chief Ryan Spangler, Fire Chief Clayton O'Brien, Assistant Fire Chief Mark Mullins, and Finance Director Nick Roman, and Building and Zoning Commissioner Stephen Schrate. Council, the first item on tonight's agenda is approval of the minutes from the September 23rd, 2024 regular and October 7th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move to approve the minutes from September 23rd regular council meeting and October 7th Committee of the Whole as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second. Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, the minutes from the September 23rd regular and October 7th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting are accepted as presented. Persons and delegations, we have no one signed in yet to speak, with reserve to come back to it afterwards. Council, we'll go to straight to the item agendas this evening. We do have one item to add, which is item 169 of 2024. And we did talk about this last week. I asked Mr. Schrake to kind of present the information on this one for the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation. Council, can I seek a motion to move item 169 to tonight's agenda?
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Seconded by Ms. Polliff. Thank you, Ms. Polliff. Motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Ms. Polliff. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 169 is added to this evening's agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Safarian.
I just was going to, I know sometimes you'll ask at each of these items or that if we administration has any other alterations to them. And except for the presentation for item number 169, we have no other alterations to any of the items that were discussed last week.
Very good. Thank you, Mayor. Moving into the first item agenda for this evening is item 163 of 2024. Councilor, are there any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 163 of 2024 as ordinance 163 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into a contract with Nemesis 902 North Superior Street, Toledo, Ohio, to provide managed network services for the Oregon Municipal Court at a monthly cost of $2,720 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Polliff.
I move for passage of ordinance 163 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Polliff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Motion by Ms. Polliff, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 163 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman? Yes. Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Wallenczak?
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 163 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 164 of 2024. Council, are there any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 164 of 2024 as ordinance 164 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the mayor and finance director to enter into an agreement with the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council, CJCC, One Government Center, Suite 1720, Toledo, Ohio, to provide criminal justice information service through the Northwest Ohio Regional Information Systems, or NORIS, and records management support for the police division for the period of January 1st, 2025 through December 31st, 2025.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council.
Mr. President,
Ms. Polliff.
I move for passage of ordinance 164 of 2024.
Thank you, Mrs. Pauloff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slender. Thank you, Mr. Slender. Motion by Mrs. Pauloff, seconded by Mr. Slender for ordinance 164 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
yes,
Mr. Drake, Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 164 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 165 of 2024. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 165 of 2024 as ordinance 165 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing and accepting the 2024 FY24 COPS Technology and Equipment Program Invitational Solicitation Grant in the amount of $963,000, which has been applied for and awarded to the Oregon Police Division by the Department of Justice, or DOJ, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Ms. Pauloff.
I move for passage of ordinance 165 of 2024 and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Pauloff.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Slander. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Motion by Ms. Pauloff, seconded by Mr. Slander for ordinance 165 of 2024. Ms. Rawson, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Slander,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
yes,
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 165 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 166 of 2024. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 166 of 2024 as ordinance 166 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Authorizing the renewal of the Ohio Plan Insurance Pool coverage and the cyber coverage to Tokyo Marine as administered by Highland Administrative Services LLC, 811 Madison Avenue, Toledo, Ohio, for property and liability insurance coverage, general liability, employers liability, employee benefits liability, law enforcement officers liability, public officials liability, automobile property, special property, electric equipment / media crime, boiler and machinery, and excess liability insurance in an initial premium amount of $290,190 and premium adjustments for additions and deletions, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. Council,
Mr. President,
Mr. Wollenzak.
I didn't hear her properly. Could you repeat that?
I was thinking the same, maybe one more time. There's some liability in there, I got a feeling.
Mr. President.
Mr. Wollenzak, go
Yes,
ahead.
I move for passage of ordinance number 166 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Wollenzak.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Wollenzak, seconded by Mr. Drake for ordinance 166 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wollenzak,
Yes.
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
yes,
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Solander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 166 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 167 of 2024. Council, any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 167 of 2024 as ordinance 167 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
A resolution imposing a 270-day moratorium on the authority of the City of Oregon Division of Building and Zoning to accept new applications for the installation of new sweepstakes terminal cafes and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rawson. And council, my correction, this is a resolution, not ordinance. Council,
Mr. President,
is that Mr. Reeves?
yes,
Mr. Reeves?
I move for passage of Resolution 167 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Wollenzak. Motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Wollenzak for Resolution 167 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Wollenzak,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
yes,
Mr. Drake,
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mrs. Pauloff,
Yes.
Mr. Slander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Resolution 167 of 2024 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to item 168 of 2024. Council, are there any questions? Hearing none, I will assign item 168 of 2024 as ordinance 168 of 2024 and ask Ms. Rawson to read it into the record.
Amending Part 11, Title 5, Supplementary District Uses and Structures adopted by establishing a new Section 1341.08 of the Codified Ordinances of the City of Oregon titled Fire Loss Claims, establishing a new Special Revenue Fund, Fund 272, Fire Loss Claims.
Thank you, Ms. Rossen. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wolfensack.
thank you, Mr. President. I move for a passage of ordinance number 168 of 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Wolfensack.
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Pauliff. Thank you, Mrs. Pauliff. Motion by Mr. Wolfensack, seconded by Mrs. Pauliff for ordinance 168 of 2024. Ms. Rossen, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Wallensack,
Yes.
Mrs. Paula,
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman,
Yes.
Mr. Drake.
Yes.
Mr. Horniak,
Yes.
Mr. Reeves,
Yes.
Mr. Slander.
Yes.
Thank you, council. Ordinance 168 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. Moving on to the last agenda item we have for the evening, item 169 of 2024. Mr. Schrake, I know you presented some of the information last week. Is there anything additional?
Mr. President, nothing additional unless there's questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Schrake. Council, any questions on item 169 of 2024? Hearing none, I will assign item 169 of 2024 as resolution 169 of 2024, and ask Ms. Rossen to read it into the record.
A resolution adopting the revised Lucas County Multi-Jurisdictional Hazard Mitigation Plan, HMP, as the official hazard mitigation plan of the City of Oregon and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Ms. Rossen. Council.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
I move for passage of Resolution 169 of 2024 as an emergency measure.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second. Seconded by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. We have a motion by Mr. Reeves, seconded by Mr. Drake for resolution 169 of 2024. Ms. Ross, will you please take a roll call vote of council?
Mr. Reeves?
Yes.
Mr. Drake?
Yes.
Mrs. Ackerman?
Yes.
Mr. Horniak?
Yes.
Mrs. Paula?
Yes.
Mr. Slander?
Yes.
Mr. Wallensack?
Yes.
Thank you, Council. Resolution 169 does pass with a vote of 7 yeas and 0 nays. That's all the items that we have on our agenda, so we would move into the mayor's report. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I do have one item. About 3 weeks ago, and I think you all know Tina Evans, we were both at the Oregon Inn this particular Friday, and she said, "Would you come out here? I want to show you something." And the owners, Kent and Anita Wolf, have a lemon tree that they have outside that cannot survive in the winter months. And they used to put it inside, but it's gotten to be about 9.5 feet tall. And Tina said, you know, they're wanting to find somebody to adopt that tree. And she said, I think it would fit nicely in the council chambers, maybe in that corner. And and so they said, could you do that? I said, well, run it by and see if anybody had any objection. But does anybody have any objection to us adopting this tree till probably April? It's kind of a neat looking little thing.
All right, we'll throw it out to the council. Council, any objection or curiosity or questions?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I would recommend a sunnier location than that corner, but sounds great.
A better location?
Pardon?
A better?
Well, yeah, it's gonna need some light.
Well, she said they put it, I
It
told
goes
her,
dormant, yeah, they probably.
but it may, maybe it
Right
could
there.
dry
Mr.
right
Rowe.
There
there.
by Nick?
Yeah, but that
Pick a
would,
lemon off during the meeting.
but she said it will
little tea.
survive.
Oh,
in-
yeah,
in
no,
the thing,
that's-
but,
yeah, it's great to do
So
that.
you might, if there's no objection, sometime yet this week, because she's going, it's getting pretty cold out, because I forgot about it last month.
Well, that's one of the more unusual requests.
Tonight.
Council, are there any objections to adopting the
Mr.
lemon tree?
President?
Ms. Pauloff.
Are we going to be held responsible if it dies?
No, she said she'll even come
It'll be
and
banned.
she doesn't want anybody to water it. She kind of treats it with tender loving care. She will water it
know.
and do any other little thing. We might have to pick up a leaf or two if they fall off, but no,
That's good.
she said it definitely will not survive if it stays where it's at.
Yeah,
All right.
really.
No, it's not going to stand.
All right, any further questions?
That
I'd
would-
ask, council, is there any objection to adopting the lemon tree?
No.
Hearing none, I believe the adoption is official.
Okay, and then I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Mayor.
We got that.
Mr. Mazer,
Thank
you,
what
Mr.
what do
President.
you have? for us?
Mine are more boring.
You gotta beat that.
I have boring things. There's There's a free vaccination clinic tomorrow at the Fire Station 41. That's Tuesday, October 15th from 10:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. It's open to the public, free to the public, no appointments needed. So anybody can show up. That's tomorrow, 10 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. at Fire Station 41. That's being put on by the Health Department. The other item is that the Chamber of Commerce is assisting the Buffalo Rock Brewing with their official grand opening. So she was wondering if we could provide any names of council members that would be attending, so they could either be recognized, or if they wanted to speak during the event, they'd be invited up. So that's this Friday at 3:30 p.m. If you could let Cassie or myself know, we can, or Jen Kurtovic directly, that'd be great. And then lastly, I think I put this in everybody's weekly update at some point, but the K. Hovnanian, that's the developer of the houses over at the town center, is putting on an event. It's actually for realtors, area realtors, for a sneak peek of the Oregon Town Center residential properties. And that's October 23rd. It's 6 to 8 p.m. That's a Wednesday. And it's at Hannon's Bar in downtown Toledo. I've never been there before, but I asked why not have it in Oregon? There wasn't a venue that was open to them, and they weren't sure if the brewery was going to be ready for them to have an event at their location. So that's what they picked. They'll be doing more events as they're marketing the properties, but this was the first official one. They were wondering if anybody from the city was going to show up. So if you could let Cassie or myself know, and we're going to put the word out there to any of the Oregonians that want to show up to that, to get the sneak peek with the realtors. And that is all I have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Mazur. Ms. Pepora.
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pepora. Mr. Roman?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to call a Parks and Recreation Quarterly Update meeting on Monday, October 21st, which is next Monday, at 5:30 in City Council Chambers. The purpose of the meeting is to discuss a policy that we have talked about before on pets at the recreation complex, and to provide a quarterly update on the recreation programs. So hopefully the two committee members will be able to be there as well. It's, like I said, we're gonna hold it at 5:30 just so we don't run into the 7 o'clock witching hour. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mrs. Pollitt?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Pollitt. Mr. Wallensack?
No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wallensack. Ms. Sackerman?
I wanted to just remind everybody about the collection day and thank Synovus for sponsoring it. And I wanted to ask if we'll be doing additional reminders, because it's great that this came out so to clean out your garage or what have you and have these things together. But I was wondering if we're going to just give people additional reminders other than Facebook or our website. And I also had a question about, is there a cost, because a lot of the Lucas County collections will have costs for some of the materials, and I don't want to surprise anybody, especially like tires and such. So who do I direct that toward?
Thank you, Ms. Sackerman. Anybody from the administration have an answer?
Mr. President, Ms.
Go ahead, Mr.
Ackerman,
Mazur.
Andrea Beard actually runs that side of it for the city, for the administration. So we can ask her and get back to you. But as far as we know, Synovus pays for everything, for all the
Okay.
disposals.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you. I just want people to know, because if you go to Lucas County, they'll have the items that they accept and the items that they'll accept at an additional fee. So I just don't want to surprise anyone. Thank you. And on a personal note, I want to thank Oregon Fire and Rescue, because I stopped in Wednesday and spoke to one of the paramedics, firefighters that my brother suffered a stroke at our farm on last Monday. That's why I was absent. And they made the wise choice to take him to St. V's in light of his condition. And that I know it saved his life, because he went directly into surgery to have a massive clot removed. And I just want to thank you personally on behalf of my brother and my sister and I and our family for your prompt, astute attention to his crisis. Thank you.
Very good. Complete. Thank you, Ms. Sacrament. Mr. Slander.
Thank you, Mr. President. Excuse me, nothing from my standing committee, just a couple quick things. One, I just wanted to unrelated, but thank the fire department, Oregon Fire and Rescue. Also, you had the open house there last week, which was outstanding. And I was only able to be there for a little bit, but it was very well attended and lots of smiles on kids' faces and everything. So great job with that. So thank you for doing that. And secondly, this last weekend was the opening weekend for Oregon Community Theater, Once Upon a Mattress. And this weekend, it will be the final weekend for it on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So if you do get a chance, support some local theater. And yes, I'm doing Genoa Community Civic Theater also. This weekend is our opening show, but it's outside of Oregon. But if you want to come see me, I would like that. So, but go to Oregon first. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Slander. Mr. Drake.
No report from my committee. I just had a question about the vaccinations. Does anybody know what they're vaccinating for?
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mr. Mazer.
this is for flu and COVID-19.
Okay. And then that Hannah's, Joel, I don't know if you knew or not. I went to a fundraiser there last week and it's right next to where the Blarney is.
Gotcha.
No, what is it? Monroe?
Monroe Street.
Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. And I have no report from my committee, so I'll seek a motion to adjourn.
Mr. President,
Mr. Reeves.
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Seconded by Ms. Polliff. Council, any objections? Meeting is adjourned.